I hope that you've had a good day so far. It's nice to come together this evening. I just want to welcome you all to Good Medicine Way. As Uncle Casey says, this is one of the best places to get a decolonial theology, decolonial teaching, and community. So we're really glad to have you today. I just want to recognize the Mono and Yokits people, the traditional lands that I'm on, and just say thank you for them allowing me to have this space to welcome you all from their traditional lands, and just want to welcome you and thank you for coming to Good Medicine Way. And our friend Preston is going to lead us with a directional prayer to open up our time together. You ready, Preston?
Hey everyone, it's good to see you guys and be able to be part of this evening's moment of Good Medicine Way. I'm just so excited for tonight's speaker. Our men's group leader. So let's get into this evening's prayer. We are here with you. As the east is behind me, the beautiful sunrise of the sun sets allows us to be able to be in moments of you, of how you are in every artistic moment, how you are every prayer, how you are in the moments of our very breath. You allow us to wake up with the breath of you. You allow us to wake up with energy and be able to have that nice cup of gold. Thank you for that energy. As we bring that energy into more feel church, everyone else here come from the south, have such a great wonderful day of heat. How you are able to bring families together from hard times and also bring love to the plants, being able to bring that sunlight, the understanding of photosynthesis, and having them be able to get good day out in fall, allowing us to be able to grow to you and allowing us to be able to continue our intake of vitamin D with our own benefits and help us in full strength as fall comes around so that we can have a moment in every moment of the understanding, share more of it. As we look to the south, to the west, thank you for understanding, seeing, allowing us to have this moment of sunset, this moment of the day of ending, allow us to have a moment with you, but also be with our families as we grow so much more. Thank you for allowing us to learn the day. Thank you for allowing us to be everything here, even for the wind and the breeze. We feel you from the north, as most of us, that's where our ancestors were from. We hear stories, we hear them being able to tell us how you are, how you are, what gives this.
Hey, Preston, you froze for a second.
I was like, yeah. Sorry. I don't know where it froze at, but thank you for allowing us to have this moment. And let us be able to have great work. Amen.
Thank you so much, Preston. We appreciate you so much. Yeah, blessings to you. Next, we're gonna have some songs from the Grovers. Yeah, thank you, Preston. And whenever you're ready, Grovers, we can enter into a time of singing songs to Creator.
All right, so where we're at is on the traditional Taylor lands. I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge their caretaking of the land. In our area, there's 19 different pueblos, a good portion of those which are Ewa. The Dene people are here and 2 Apache bands. And then I also hear that the Ute got down this way on the hunting trips too. But in any case, we acknowledge that, and we're going to share the words here. We're going to do Jonathan Miracles, We Are One, and then we're going to do the song that Danny Zacharias wrote for.
Hey, Brian, there's no audio.
Brian, no audio, no audio.
Petadaka just said, remember, they can't hear us.
No, I heard that. Let me.
Oh, okay.
I think I was kind of loud.
Away, yo, guy, away. Away, yo, guy, away. Away, yo, guy, away. Away, yo, guy, away, yo, hey, away, yo, hey, guy, away. Oh, we can hear now.
You guys hear the drum okay?
Yes.
All right, then we're good. You way go guy away. 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 You way guy away. You way go 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 guy away. You way
Thank you so much for those beautiful songs. Yeah, I appreciate you guys. We're grateful that you always come every week and provide us with music. So thank you so much. And next we have Eshe with Creation Insights.
All right, all right. Thank you, thank you. I like your shirt, by the way, Christina. I see that that's Happy Givers, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
One of my favorite groups.
Yes,
Yes,
thanks.
I love them what they do. But yeah, I just wanted to share a creation insight for tonight. Oh, can you all hear me? My wife wanted to make sure that you can hear me. Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to share a creation insight tonight. I have 3 little points that I want to kind of include in that. Just kind of some lessons I learned actually today. Things kind of we went over in my life, and I think it'll be a blessing to you all. So the first 2 include humans, and I feel like that's part of creation that we don't have to include of or think of, and I think it's important to think of ourselves as part of creation. And so first 2 include humans, and the last one includes some blue jays, some birds. So I'm going to bring them up too, our feathered relatives. But so the first one I want to include is we just got back. We're on our way back right now from what is now called Charleston, South Carolina, and to get some groceries. And there was a young man there at the store we were getting some food at, and he was talking to us and very sociable with the cashier, and we are just like talking to him, and he was very outgoing. And I was like, he was talking about, we had our youngest son with us, and he's almost 2, and I was like, so do you have any kids? And he was like, no, I'm getting ready to be a brother though. And I was like, sorry, I put myself on mute. But I was saying, oh, that's cool. Like, that's cool that you're getting a brother. And he was like, how old do you think I am? Like, so my wife, Melissa, and I were like, I don't know. I was like, maybe 18, 19. And Melissa was like, 20, 21. And he was like, no, I'm 16. And I was like, okay, you're a little bit younger than we thought. And anyways, so that's the first story, and then I'll kind of get to the point at the end. I don't want to give away the spoiler. So the second story, we're on our way back, and my wife Melissa and I were kind of talking about just kind of unresolving, like kind of going through our traumatic past experiences. And so my wife gave me permission to share this one. I'll leave out some details to kind of keep it sensitive, but back in 2016, we went to like a Bible worker training. Dang, I'm getting every red light. Sorry. And anyways, went to a Bible worker training, and she would do like go around the neighborhood and give Bible studies with different people that she was with. And her trying to be herself, she would approach the Bible from a place of curiosity, and a place of curiosity not only of the text but also the people that she was dialoguing with or communicating with. And a lot of times the ones she would be working with wouldn't necessarily appreciate that. They'd be like, afterwards they'd be like, you shouldn't say that, because it wasn't like trying to prove the point of a text or like the doctrinal point. And Melissa gradually learned not to be herself and to just shut down and let other people speak, instead of her being herself and speaking like she was. And so we were just talking about that. And then the last point I want to bring up, I brought the 2 humans, now I include the blue jays. So the blue jays, this morning we were eating breakfast. It was either this morning or yesterday morning, one of the 2 mornings. Get them mixed up sometimes. But anyways, they were we have like a little what do you call it, like a water fountain, like how like a water bath, like a bird bath. There you go, bird bath. And anyways, they have like, we have some cardinals that come in there sometimes, and you know, some chickadees, all kinds of different birds. They like to bathe in there. And there was like probably a couple cardinals, and then like the blue jays would try to get close, like they would get on the rim of the bird bath, and then like one of the cardinals would like, you know, open their mouth and chase them like, get out of here, like I'm trying to bathe, like this is my space. And the lesson that I get from all of this is like, be yourself. The blue jays didn't try to be cardinals in order to fit in and be in the bath. They were confident in who they were as blue jays. And so like my wife Melissa, like she was not allowed to be herself. And you know, and that young man that I met earlier, you know, he was himself, but he was also, there was this sense of innocence, and there was this sense of like I don't know how to explain it, like this unhardness, like this uncallousness maybe to like the world. Like there was just this openness to new experiences. And he was very much himself. And I really, like, you don't really see that a lot. You don't see people like, you know, people will be like professional, you know, they'll be quote unquote professional, quote unquote like polite, but it's very generic, right? It's like, hello, goodbye, have a good day. But you don't know how much of it is real and genuine, right? It's just like scripted. But this guy was genuine. Like everything he said, he was like, hey, where are you all from? Like, where are you going to? You know, how's your day going? You know, he was going beyond just the surface questions. And so I don't know who I'm speaking to right now, but in terms of like where you're at in your life and your journey, but I want to say this, like, give yourself permission to be yourself. Don't let anyone take that from you, because Creator has only made one of you. Don't try to be a cardinal when you're a blue jay. And so that is what I have to share with you all tonight. And I pray that we can all be ourselves in a world that is desperately trying to make us into something else.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate how nature creation just spoke a sermon, you know, and you were able to share that with us. So thank you. Thanks for those creation insights. And we have the lovely Leah McCoo, who's going to lead us again in the Lord's Prayer in ASL.
Oh, good evening. Good evening. Ready? Oh, great Spirit, our Father from above, we honor your name as sacred, holy. Bring your good road to us, where the beauty of your ways in the spirit world is reflected in the earth below. Provide for us day by day the elk, the buffalo, and the salmon. The corn, the squash, and the wild rice. All the things we need for each new day. release us from the things we have done wrong. In the same way, we release others for the things done wrong to us. Guide us away from the things that that tempt us to stray from your good road, and free us from the evil one and his worthless ways. Aho, may it be so.
Thank you so much, Leah. My auntie, who's actually here with me right now, she's fluent in ASL, so she saw me signing and she was excited. So thank you so much for leading us. Yeah, that was awesome. And we have smoke signals and our giveaway next with Leah.
All right. Well, my first smoke signal is to introduce who is this person here. Well, this is Pastor Kim Kinsey, who actually, Brian and she went to the same youth group in high school in Albuquerque back in the 1980s. Some of you remember the 1980s here. But then we kind of went our own ways and got to know each other again when we moved back down to Albuquerque. And she is, historical with Good Medicine Way because she was the pastor of Christ United Methodist Church here in town, where back in 2017 when we started, she was letting us meet in the church there. So that was a historical, memory, paving the road of many other memories of our friendship. But she's here today. She's working on her doctoral dissertation. So, definitely pray for her to have great wisdom and clarity in finishing that up. And the regular smoke signal I talk about every week is what all the ladies are invited to. Our Women's Circle, we're discussing Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, in which she combines her, yes, there's the book cover there. She combines her Potawatomi knowledge of the view of nature and the created world as our relatives, and teaches the idea of reciprocity, just to give back and be in harmony. But she also combines that with her doctorate in ecological science, so the Western and the native, she blends together in a very nourishing way. So all the ladies are invited to come to that Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. You go to the Facebook Good Medicine Way group, and at the top left, you click on Browse, and then Events, and then that you'll be able to come through that on Zoom. And there's the alternate book cover there. And so yeah, if you can find one of those, they're good. Most libraries have it, public libraries. And Jean, do you want to talk about the men's book discussion?
Yes, men's book discussion Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. We are working our way through Randy Woodley's book, Mission and the Cultural Other. We're on chapter 8, which sounds like we're way far into the book, but there is plenty more to discuss. So if you are interested, men, in joining us, please email me. Dave put my email address in the chat, or let Uncle Casey know or Brian know, and we'd be happy to have you join us.
Mm-hmm. And you said that's Wednesdays at 5?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Alrighty, and then if other people have any smoke signals they'd like to share, you can post them in the chat and we'll get those told. And else?
One thing we can be remembering is Jika Bikwe is like in the midst of her flurry of summer camps with her iEmergence. I think they just finished one and they're about to start another one. But anyway, if you're interested in that, you can just look her up on Facebook, iEmergence Saskatchewan, and see what she's doing. But yeah, she's a long time comrade of Good Medicine Way, and so we want to lift up her other endeavors and keep her covered in prayer as she's working with all those young ladies.
And someone just posted in the chat about Wichoni Family Camp, July 27th through 30th. And I believe they've got the link there in the chat. And also Christina has a women's spiritual care circle Wednesday nights. And she's asking for prayer for the women there in that group, and that we could pray while we're in our book discussion. Yes. Remind us, everybody, all the ladies, to pray for the other women's circle too. All right, and after that is the giveaway time, and I would like to challenge myself and anyone to think about reciprocity. That's a thing that I've been learning about in braiding sweetgrass. Even ideas like, I love and appreciate these trees, all they give us, the shade, the clean air, the birds. I want to remember to water them, so they don't, get all frizzled to a crisp, in the desert or whatever. That's something that's been striking me. Another way of reciprocity, if you're blessed by Good Medicine Way, you're welcome at this time to donate to our work. And a couple ways to do that. You can go again to the top of the Good Medicine Way Facebook page. There's a logo there to click on to donate through PayPal or whatever your card of choice is. And then during this song here that we're going to do in a minute, Brian will put up our QR code blanket, which you can take a picture of and donate that way if you would like to.
And then another way that you could give is because for the song during the giveaway time, we try to branch out a little bit and do some out of the ordinary things. So that would be a great time if you have any kind of song or something that can be shared orally. Let us know.
Like a skit?
And we'll, if you could do it orally, just we can't see it. Yeah, we can put you in there. So yeah, if you have a traditional story, or if you have a song, or like some poems, or whatever. And today we're going to be trying to do this old spiritual. So we'll see how that goes.
Soon I will be done the troubles of this world. Soon I will be done with the troubles of this world. Soon I will be done the troubles of this world. I'm going home to be with God.
Thank you again, and thanks for everyone taking time to consider how you might want to partner with Good Medicine Way. We appreciate you all, and we couldn't do this without you, so thank you for that. And Namar, I hear that you have creator's word for us today. And thank you again. Thank you, Grovers, for always providing our music. Yeah, we love you guys. We're thankful for you.
Can you hear me? All right. Aho. Aho. Good evening, everyone. How y'all doing out there? Good, good. I hope you all are staying cool and hydrated. You know, it's really, really hot up here. It's gotten up to 114. So I'm getting cooked. Yeah, they're trying to make me look even more brown than I already am. All right. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. I'm very, very grateful to see all of you. Thank you, Grovers, for your great music. Thank you for continuing to show off. It inspires me. All right. So we have the word, First Nations version. The word of Creator sets free. Jesus, this is in Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 48. Are you all with me? Ready? All right. It is written, love your enemies. You have been told to love only your own people and to despise others as your enemy. But I tell you, treat your enemies with love and respect, and send up good prayers for the ones who make trouble for you and bring you pain. This will show that you are mature children of your Father from above, who sends his blessing of rain on the ones who do right and the ones who do wrong. If you love and show respect only to the ones who do the same, how does that bring honor to you? Even tribal tax collectors do these things. If you welcome only friends, how are you different from others? Even outsiders from other nations do these things. By loving and blessing all people, you will be walking in the footsteps of your Father from the spirit world above, who is perfect in all his ways. Aho. May this be a blessing to the readers, listeners, and doers of the good road.
Aho, thank you. Thank you so much, Namar, for reading for us. And we keep the Grovers busy around here every service. I'm like, and the Grovers again with our meditation music. Thanks for providing that for us, Brian. And after we have our reflection time, either Brian or Casey will introduce us. We're excited to hear from Jean tonight.
All right, so Gene Stevenson, our featured sharer tonight, originally hails from southeastern Pennsylvania. That's the traditional lands of the Lenni Lenape and the Susquehannock tribes. Hopefully I was close enough. He and his wife and 3 children moved to Flagstaff, so-called Flagstaff, Arizona, unceded Dene territory, 4 years ago, where he briefly served as the academic dean of Indian Bible College, which is a great story if you're ever hanging out there. He now works as the academic coordinator for a young adult transition center in Sedona and as the executive director of religious and theological abstracts, a nonprofit organization that compiles summaries of academic journal articles into an online searchable database. Wow, that sounds like a lot of work. Gene is in the dissertation writing phase of a Doctorate of Theology program in contextual theology through Evangelical Seminary. He is writing about the theological roots of Western mission work among Indigenous North Americans with an eye toward articulating more culturally respectful and relevant modes of outreach. So there's a little snippet about Gene, and with that, I'll let him take it away.
Hello, everybody. So good to be with you tonight and to see all your beautiful smiling faces. I've been off and on the past couple months for 2 reasons. One is a normal summer activity of travel and kids being off of school and things, and the other is we just moved from Flagstaff a couple miles west to a small town called Belmont. I want to acknowledge that Belmont is the traditional land of the Hopi, the Hualapai, and the Havasupai tribes. And of course, the San Francisco Peaks, so-called San Francisco Peaks, are considered sacred to a great many tribes, including the Dene and the Inde peoples. And I want to acknowledge their care for this land and my gratefulness for their stewardship. As for myself, if we have not met before, Brian gave you a bit of a snapshot of kind of the work history. As far as my background, I am pretty solidly German and English in my ethnicity, as well as Scottish. And I've had great fun recently digging into the Scottish part of my ancestry, and can report that I come from the traditional clans of Donald, Stuart, and McLaughlin, which is not a Scottish law firm, though it kind of sounds like it. But just some great fun in discovering my roots. And as a personal word of testimony, being in contact with Uncle Casey and just being part of Good Medicine Way and some other groups has really given me permission to look into the places where my ancestors were indigenous to and their cultures. And that's just, it's been such a blessing. I know that Uncle Casey and even Uncle Randy Woodley would say that everybody's indigenous from somewhere. And the challenge for a lot of us who are descendants of Western European immigrants and colonizers is we have forgotten the lands that we were indigenous to at one time. So it's been very freeing to be given permission to explore that, and I'm appreciating that. The word for tonight that I wanted to bring has to do with what I call the Jesus model of contextualization. I think we can find many biblical examples of healthy contextualization, and especially through the words of Creator Sets Free. And I'd like to share some of those thoughts with you tonight, and welcome any response that you might have, any additional thoughts, or even pushback. Would love for that as well, as this is just part of a conversation. I'm considering this presentation part of a conversation. So if I can go ahead and share my screen with you all. All right, can you all see that? Good thumbs up. Yep. All right. So the Jesus model of contextualization, which if you're listening and reflecting on the passage that Namar read, you might know where we're going with this, but I'd still part of the joys and the journey, right? So thank you for allowing me to share with you. I thought before we get started, maybe it would be helpful for us to take a look at this word contextualization, which is long and kind of academic, and maybe just kind of flesh out what it is that we're talking about when we talk about contextualization. And this is a definition that I offer, just kind of as a summary of my readings and my understanding, certainly not all encompassing. But my understanding of contextualization is to express an idea or communicate a message in the language and thought forms of a given culture, or to speak another's heart language. The concept of heart language has really captured my my spirit, my imagination in recent years, and just basically what I mean by that is the idea that we all, from the very beginning of our time on this earth, we start to be shaped and molded by the language and the ways of looking at the world that we're introduced to from the very beginning. And that takes deep root in us, right? Because it happens at such an early age. And this could be not just forms of expression or a viewpoint, but even language itself, right? And the way that different languages describe the world, like that takes root deep in our hearts, and becomes what we call a heart language. It's the way of looking at the world and describing the world that makes the most sense to us. And contextualization is the idea of speaking a heart language, speaking the heart language of somebody else, speaking our own heart language, knowing what our heart language is, with the idea that when that happens, whatever idea or message we were trying to communicate hits at the very deepest parts of ourselves, right? So when we, for instance, attempt to communicate the story of Scripture, the story of the Bible, the story of Creator sets free, if we can do that in the heart language of a people, it will hit very deeply. And just a quick testimony about the First Nations version. I was worshiping with a small multi-ethnic congregation here in Flagstaff. This was a couple months back, and I just so happened to be sitting down next to a Dene woman, and I had my First Nations Bible out, and I could tell that she was noticing it, because she would look out of the side of her eye, just kind of glance at it and then look away, and then glance at it and look away. And then finally she asked me, what do you have there? And I told her what the First Nations version was, and she said, can I see it? And of course I gave it to her, and she would page through it a bit, and then she'd put it down, she'd page through it some more and put it down. And then she paged through, and she just started reading. She kept it open, started reading. And no sooner had she done that than she said, I can understand this better. And I said, that was the intent of the First Nations version. And needless to say, that became her gift that day, that copy of the First Nations version Bible. But that's the idea of a heart language. And the idea of contextualization is intentionally learning the heart language of people and communicating in that heart language. So when we talk about contextualization, that's what we mean. And contextualization is based on this idea. Missionary Andrew Walls, Scottish, I believe, actually, who makes this statement in a book that he wrote. He says that society never existed which could absorb the word of Christ painlessly into its system. And what he means by that, a teacher of mine once gave this image. It's as though the gospel is like a hand coming down into a styrofoam cup, and it just, the cup cannot hold it. So it breaks out of the cup. And the idea that Andrew Walls is expressing here is that the gospel comes in contact with every culture, but no culture neatly and nicely wraps it up. The gospel is going to challenge it and stretch it, right? Every culture, and that's what Andrew Walls is trying to get at by making this statement. And we'll come back to that at the end, because there's an important word about that I want to share. But very good concept to keep in mind when we talk about contextualization. So what goes into the process of contextualization? Just forewarning, I am a word nerd, so I'm gonna drop some word nerdiness on you. I hope that's okay. For a second, contextualization involves recalibration. And the heart of that word is caliber, which actually comes from the Arabic, which means to mold. So contextualization involves recalibration, which is to remold something. And the images we get are, if you can picture a stream, we have the water, but the water follows the channels of the land, wherever that goes. So too does traffic. I come from Pennsylvania. The joke about Pennsylvania is they have 2 seasons of the year, winter and construction. So if you've been on the highways recently, especially around Flagstaff, you know that traffic has to follow the traffic pattern. So there's a flow to it. Or just any vessel of different shape. The shape of the vessels may change, but if, for say, we're filling each of the vessels with water, that water is the same. It just takes the shape of the vessel. This is the idea of contextualization, right? That there's an idea or message that is being communicated in the heart language of a people. So how do we see Jesus exercising the activity of contextualization? I'm going to use the New Living Translation just for this next part, though I really do love the First Nations version of Matthew 5:43 to 48. And maybe you can tell where we're going with this already, but let's go there together. So we have this teaching, part of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus says, "You have heard it said, love your enemy," or love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, pause right there. In one of my previous presentations, I talked about the cultural coordinates of Jesus. Talk about the concept that everybody on the earth, and anybody that's born, has cultural coordinates. That means you're born into a particular culture at a particular point in history, particular geographical location, speaking a particular language, right? That's cultural coordinates. And of course, Jesus' cultural coordinates, he was born as a first century Palestinian Jewish man. And in that time, of course, first century Palestine, who was occupying the land as their colonizers, as their overlords? It's the Romans, right? So when Jesus says, "You have heard it said," he's also essentially saying, and I've heard it said too. I know that you hear this because I've heard it too. I've been part of this culture, grown up in it. I've lived among you. I know what you hear. And I know that this is one of the things that you hear. And if you read back through chapter 5 of Matthew, you know that there are several of these teachings back to back to back where Jesus is saying, "You have heard it said, you have heard it said, you have heard it said." And Jesus is demonstrating in that a knowledge of his context, right? He knows what the people have heard because he has heard it as well. And he's acknowledging that up front when he's giving this teaching. So you have heard it said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. That's the acknowledgement of the context. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And that's the recalibration. So Jesus is acknowledging the context, then he's recalibrating the teaching that the context gives. And he doesn't just leave it at that. And I love that. I love that about Jesus, that he doesn't just like tell people what to do. He actually gives them a reason, right? And this is the next part. That you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. And then he kind of asks these questions, like, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Like even the pagans act in that particular way that contextual teaching gives you. But so that you may be children of your Father in heaven, let's do it this way, right? And then he caps that off with, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And if you want to unpack that statement, we're actually on that part in Randy Woodley's book in our men's study on Wednesday evening. So please join us for that to see what Randy says about that teaching about being perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I'm also I use kingdom reasoning, not to mean Christendom, not to mean the institutional church, but here I'll also rely on Uncle Randy and unpack that. And he says when he thinks of kingdom, the kingdom of God, he thinks of the community of creation or the community of creator. And that's the kind of reasoning that Jesus is giving, the reasoning of creator about the recalibration of the teaching. So that's where we see the Jesus entering into the act of contextualization, right? Just one example. And these are the hallmarks of good, healthy contextualization. And I know there have been movements in the past that have claimed to be contextually sensitive and were not, right? And that's because they were lacking one or more of these things. So true Christ-centered contextualization is spirit-inspired and love-driven, right? It's in harmony with Creator's heart and standards. And that's the piece in my studies of the history of Western missions work among Indigenous North Americans, and anybody who has read that story or parts of that story, the idea of the missions practice being in harmony with Creator's heart is where we often find the historical missions practices lacking the heart of Creator in communicating with people. So contextualization is spirit-inspired and love-driven. It has to be in harmony with Creator's heart and standards. And it's to communicate the gospel, not just in word, but in action as well. The good news. And it's a question that I've often posed in different circles and wrestled with among different groups of people, that if it's not good news to a people, is it the gospel? Because the gospel by definition is the good news, right? So those are the hallmarks of good, healthy, Christ-centered contextualization. Now, there are a couple different types of contextualization, and this is where I'm still kind of feeling out, this is a more Gene's theory on different types of contextualization. So take this with a grain of salt, right? But we have corrective contextualization with contrast with accepted wisdom. If we go back and read the teaching before this one that we read tonight, it's Jesus saying, you've heard the law that says an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil man. That's where you get, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other cheek, right? That teaching is a corrective. He is directly contrasting with a piece of the accepted contextual wisdom that is embedded in his particular context, right? So he's not keeping anything about that part, that teaching. He's actually contradicting it or contrasting. So there's corrective contextualization. There's also constructive, where you're taking a piece of the contextual wisdom, but you're either breathing new life into it, you're bringing clarity to it, right? Clarifying things. So the question is, and this is for everybody, and you can chime in, which of these do you think is found in Matthew 5:43 to 48?
Just want anybody to kind of shout it out.
One. Women.
So I hear a couple ones. Any votes for two? Got a vote for two. Yeah.
I would tend to lean towards two but there's a lot of explanation.
Couple of ones, couple of twos. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Oh, Eshe says both. Yeah, it's a little bit of a cruel irony. I think there's a little bit of both in it. Jesus is acknowledging, hey, you love your neighbors. That's good. Let's keep that part, but let's expand it out and say love your enemies too. So I think there might be a little bit of both in there. But it would be an interesting exercise to go through, especially those teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5, and see what is he doing to the contextual wisdom, to the accepted wisdom in each of those teachings. Is he coming up against it and saying, I know this is what you believe and what you've heard and what you think is accepted practice, but actually the creator's way is over here in another direction? Or is he taking it and is he playing with it? Is he saying this is okay, but let's provide greater scope or greater depth or greater clarity to it? Be an interesting exercise to do. But we see here in this particular passage a Jesus model of contextualization. Now, another question to you would be, where else off the top of your head would you say, would you point to Jesus participating in the exercise of contextualization? Okay, Christina says the parables. Good.
I would start from the very beginning. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Sounds like Uncle Casey.
Yeah, I only joined you guys. Sorry I'm late. Yeah, I would start with Jesus from the very beginning, came from heaven to earth and come in from a totally different context into this context. So he had to totally contextualize. He didn't come here as the spirit of yet. He came in flesh. So he came into a world that already existed, he became a part of it. So that's just one start to get the conversation rolling. Became one of us.
Yeah, Andrew Walls, who I quoted earlier, says that the incarnation, God becoming flesh in Jesus Christ, is the single greatest act of translation that we know of. Yeah. And I think you could expand that and say it's the single greatest act of contextualization. And Jesus even points to that later when he says, if you've seen me, you have seen the Father. So the embodiment of Creator is there in Creator Sets Free. And we see God through seeing Creator Sets Free in the way he acts. Thank you, Uncle Casey.
Well, another one might be when he, breaks the bread at communion. He totally sets a new contrast in the accepting the way. If you pointed out what contextualization is, he's transforming that. He's what you call recalibrating what they've been doing so far, and now you're going to be doing it this way. He says, "Yeah, for me."
Yeah, very good point. Someone else said, Diane said, road to Emmaus. Are you thinking, Diane, of when he's teaching them as they're walking all that scripture, all that the law and the prophets say about him? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think he's kind of saying, you've understood it this way, but here, let me go back through it and we'll look at it again, and I'll help you, bring you along and kind of help you see it through new eyes, is the best I can say.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Like for me, the way these two forms work together is that it's value, something that God gave to people, but it's something that through the years has gotten misinterpreted and construed in ways that go away from the original intent. And that's where the corrective part comes in. So I think, that's why, Jesus frames it because, we've heard it this way, but I'm really showing you like the fuller meaning. So for me, that's how those both work together. And I think in terms of contextualization, I really think of the Syrophoenician woman at the well and that whole exchange where Jesus is coming up against the cultural taboos of the people that he's living among, but yet showing how the Creator's love for all people can transcend those taboos because it's very carefully and in a way that doesn't just run roughshod over those traditions, but kind of leads them into a better way of being as Creator has intended to be.
Yeah, there's a sense in which anytime Jesus embraces like the lepers or with the woman at the well, to your point, Brian, anytime he embraces those people, he is providing some corrective contextualization. You believe these people are untouchable and unclean, but let me tell you what I believe about them, and provides healing, talks with them, touches them, all these things. There's a bit of that corrective contextualization movement in that as well. Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts, examples? Well,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Jim? Yeah, this is Namar. Thank you very much for your illustration and for your teaching of contextualization. I really appreciate your research and your ability to articulate this. And I'm not trying to get off topic here, but I'm thinking about the experiences that I've had when I've traveled or served with Richard and with Casey when we went to the Rosebud Res, and with Corky and with J.R. Lilly and many others. And I've talked with them about this before, but here's something that I noticed between those who were there with us, who were darker skinned, and those who were with us who were white. You see, those, and I'm not saying all, but most of them, they expressed to me behind closed doors, they expressed their discomfort with what we were doing when we were there. How the natives that we encountered there, they very much wanted us to hear their story. As we were sharing the gospel with them or serving them and so forth. Whereas most of the whites who were there with us, they had a strong emphasis on doing something for them. As in, it was like this. It's like the attitude was, okay, what happened to them was really bad. We get that. Now, what can we do about it? Let's do something for them. Right? But then when they were pushed to learn more about the history of these people, learning more about the needs that they may have and what they go through, there was a very discomfort about learning that kind of history and going through that experience. There was a strong emphasis on do the work for them. So with all of that being said, what would you say as a scholar of contextualization, what would you say to those people who serve as missionaries, especially when they have good intentions but may not know the right approach to people like indigenous people, or on a res, especially on a res like Rosebud?
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for teeing me up there, Namar, because that leads into a few last thoughts that I had on contextualization. I have a lot of thoughts on that because I've been wrestling with that quite a bit. One of the things that I didn't put in the brief bio and give to Brian, primarily because I'm not sure how to feel about it just yet. I'm still wrestling with it. Is my wife and I are approved missionaries through 2 denominations based in Pennsylvania, and the more I study and the more I learn, the less comfortable I get with that designation, for reasons of the historic trends that we've seen, but also because of the implications that are made with that. And one of the things that I really wrestled when I first moved out here and started working with Native students at the Bible College was, the question that came to my mind was, Lord, why? Not why me as in a pity party, but why am I here doing this work? I believe you've called me to this place. I believe you've led me to this place. There's some pretty profound things that happened along the way that convinced me of that leading. But I've never been comfortable, and I'm still not sure that indigenous North Americans need another Western European Protestant telling them how to do the faith. I just don't know that that's a thing. I'm pretty sure it's not a thing, actually. And that kind of, if I can roll into some final thoughts, there are a pair of scholars named Stephen Bevins and Roger Schroeder, and they are scholars who've worked in the area of contextual theology for quite a number of years. And they wrote a book called Prophetic Dialogue. There, if I can get there we go. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me introduce you to this again, more on Andrew Walls. Andrew Walls says there are 2 basic principles of missiology. One is the pilgrimizing principle that says there are aspects of a culture that contradict the gospel and need to be let go. And then what he calls the indigenizing principle, which means there are aspects of a culture that actually aid in communicating the gospel to a people group and should be preserved. Okay, so just throwing those 2 principles out there from Andrew Walls. Now, that whole idea, though, of the pilgrimizing and indigenizing principles, Stephen Bevins and Roger Schroeder played with that, and they say this. They actually dipped into anthropology, and they say, okay, to think about this, we need to think about whether we are an outsider to a cultural group or an insider to a cultural group. And what they call prophetic dialogue is basically the twin acts of speaking out and letting go. That's how the prophetic part is the speaking out, the dialogue is the letting go. And they say this looks different based on whether you are an insider or an outsider to a cultural group. They say for an outsider, letting go consists of constant, honest observation and listening. This is, your place is not to speak. Your place is to be quiet, to listen, to learn, right? Let go of your lenses and filters as much as is possible. And that is a very tall task, because we often have lenses and filters that we're not even aware of. So maybe identifying the lenses and filters first, the ways that we see the world that are particular to our cultural location, our cultural coordinates. And then as much as is possible, let them go, put them off to the side. Relinquish certainties and cherished ideas, AKA stereotypes. You have to let those things go. You got to let go of them, because they will get in the way of that honest observation and listening, right? and then stepping aside. As an outsider to a cultural community, you are not there first to get in the midst of everything and do stuff, right? This is, again, this is what Bevins and Schroeder say. So speaking out may be voicing a critique of the context, but only after letting go. It is not to speak first. It is not to do first. It is to listen first and observe first and let go of preconceived notions, right? And involves humility. Speaking out involves humility and even vulnerability. And I would say prior to all of this, and this is something I thank Uncle Casey for pointing out, relationship has to be the foundation, right? Relationship with people has to be before any of this. So that's what Bevins and Schroeder say is, this is for the outsider, this is what you have to do when you're interacting with a cultural group. Now, I haven't pointed out, they call this the spirituality of enculturation. I want to point out the problematic nature of that term, enculturation, and its relative acculturation. I just want to point that out and acknowledge it. This is what they call it. So anyway, for the insider to a cultural group, speaking out and letting go looks different. So speaking out is what you do first. It's voicing a critique from the boundary of your cultural group. Also involves constant, honest observation and listening to the people within your group. Trust in your culture and experience. This is positive discernment of grace. This is what Good Medicine Way does so well when we say, what in historic indigenous North American teaching was good, because there was good, in contrast to other Western missionaries who came in and said, for instance, everything is bad. Well, that's not true. That was never true, that everything in a culture is bad. There was good things here. There are good things here. And we need to trust those, point them out, acknowledge them, and trust in those positive discernments of grace. And then stepping up on behalf of the marginalized within the group. Again, this isn't for the insider to a particular cultural group. And then letting go means revising or abandoning cultural ways that are incompatible with the gospel. That's the insider's job. That happens after speaking out. Okay, this is what Bevins and Schroeder say. And all this is an answer and partial answer to your question, Tamar. So what would I say to missionaries? First of all, if you're a Western missionary and you are an outsider to a group, your primary duty, if I can be absolutely blunt, is to shut your mouth and open your eyes. That's your first step, right? And your ears, open your ears as well, right? And build relationship. And you may or may not get to the point where you offer a critique of the contextual framework. That may or may not ever happen. But that's not the primary job. That job belongs to the insider, to the cultural group. And if we're going to point this back to the Jesus model of contextualization, the reason why Jesus teaches the way he does is because he is an insider to that group, right? He is not preaching to Caesar, right? He's not preaching to the Greeks. He's preaching to the people amongst whom he lived and grew up. And guaranteed, there were people that he knew in the crowd listening to him preach the Sermon on the Mount, right? He was talking to his people, right? Now, a fun theological exercise would be to notice that Jesus is both insider and outsider, because he is God in the flesh, right? And that does some things, which would be fun to play with. But for our purposes here tonight, just noticing again that Jesus as the insider is perfectly well within his rights as a part of that particular cultural group to address the crowd in the way that he did. And of course, the one of the profound things about that is, in teaching his own culture, he is teaching the rest of the cultures in the world about the ways of Creator and what Creator values, right? So that's impartial. I have a lot of other thoughts on that, but I'll just leave it at that for now. And just I want to because Diane offered a really good question, and I'm really anxious to get to the question and response time, but I want to just cap the presentation with this thought. I want to go back to this quote from Andrew Walls: "That society never existed which could absorb the word of Christ painlessly into its system." So for me, I apply that idea by looking first at the cultural group to which I am an insider, which is a Western European Protestant evangelical institutionalized, colonized Christianity. I'm not thinking about other cultures when I try to apply this quote to myself, because that is not my place. My place is to address, first of all, the group to which I'm a part. So there's contextualization that needs to be done there. There is accepted wisdom within the institutional evangelical church that needs to be challenged. There are clarifications that need to be done. There is work to be done there. And so I have especially lately come to feel like that is part of the work that the Lord has me do. So I am more comfortable in an ironic way, I'm more comfortable with the mantle of missionary if by missionary I think of myself going back to my group of origin and teaching them about what I'm learning, rather than vice versa. So I don't know how much, if that makes sense. It makes sense in my mind, but those are my thoughts. I just feel like I need to come back there and cap the presentation off with those thoughts. So I guess, Brian, I'll turn it over for the time of reflection, and then there are some thoughts and questions that we have in the chat already that we can talk about.
Hands are going up.
Yeah. So next we do have just some reflection music. Some Native American flute by Brian, as Jean said, and then afterwards we'll have some question and response time with the group. Thank you so much, Brian. And thank you so much for your message, Jean, and for giving us all the things that you've been thinking of. And it sounds like it comes from a place of integrity as well, as you're thinking of these things for yourself and even, in your own vocation. So thanks for that. And let's go ahead and just open it up. There are some questions already, so we can, continue some of those conversations. But you can also put some questions in the chat if there's things that you'd like to ask Jean. I'll go ahead and leave that open for some questions. It looks like Diane's ready.
Thank you, Christina. And thank you, Jean, for being with us tonight. We are very gifted and blessed that you are here speaking on a very important topic. And I have to agree with Christina that you came with integrity and deep humility in what you are trying to understand and learn and everything. I think one of the things, I don't remember what slide you're on, but one of the big things that came to me was something I know I am bad at this. We need to learn to listen. I don't know, the little cliche, I don't know how many of us have heard this before, but God gave you 2 ears, 1 mouth. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you speak. I really think that's one of the biggest things we could do. On that other thing where you were talking about the outsiders and the insiders, if I could speak a small difference, when they said in the second section for the outsiders, where it says critique, right away I was like, no, I would like to change that. I would like to change that to where I would speak to if I could have a voice in that, within that culture somehow, I would ask someone, please give me better understanding. It might be that the way it was explained or the way they spoke, it came because you're speaking between 2 cultures. Maybe you're hearing it completely different from how they're saying it, So I would have changed that. That's not a critique of you. It's the guy who wrote the book, I guess, and it's just my personal feelings. And then when you spoke about asking God, why, and something came to me that it's like, yes, you will be working with and among Indigenous peoples, but I felt like God, I don't know if God was saying this or if it's just me, but it was like, I think he's doing a lot of this and learning all of this and studying it and really digging deep into it so that maybe he can teach us white folk a few things, I think we need to learn a lot, and we need someone with your heart, maybe more than one with your heart, because you can't do it all by yourself. But I really thank you for your heart with it in this matter. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Diane. Yeah, and I don't want to put that all on Bevins and Schroeder. That could have been my interpretation of Bevins and Schroeder. But that's why I say outsiders who may never get to the point, may never ever get to the point. Maybe it's not appropriate, and that I hear that completely. And I don't know that I would ever feel comfortable leveling a critique. I think the most I could do is what you were saying about taking this. I've observed this. I've been listening and seeing things. I've observed this. Can you help me understand better? Would probably be the best that I could hope for, and the approach that I hope I would take.
And in that, you build that all important relationship because you have a conversation.
Right.
So from the Facebook chat, Claudette Carson asked, why did Richard and all his colleagues have to prove who they were and be qualified by getting PhDs in religion? Do most Indigenous really understand what these words mean? Is it important? Is it getting us closer to Yeshua, Creator, etc.? So I don't know if you want to speak to that, Jean, or as one of Richard's colleagues who got a PhD, if Casey might want to address that as well. But I think it's a good question, and that what are we getting these degrees for and what are we accomplishing by them? If they're not helping us communicate to the people, what are they bringing to the table that is helping the process?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's an Uncle Casey question. If you don't mind, Uncle Casey chiming in on that.
No, that would be fine. You know, right now, everyone that's here and in this listening right now are the total recipients of the benefits of all the years that she just talked about, the guys that started and the guys and gals that started this thing. And 30 years ago, when we first broke ground on trying to move forward on this, we were shut down every turn that we came to. No one would back us. We wouldn't be listened to, but we knew we were right in going this direction. So one of the main things that we thought about there, this was, 25 years ago when we said we are not going to be taken seriously until we have the academic degrees that the rest of academia has. So there was no contextual seminary that we could go to. The only resources that we had were some missionaries that were coming back from the field who were trying and implementing contextual approaches. So some of those were at Asbury and some of those were at other schools, but I chose Fuller Seminary because there were 4 missionaries who came back and they were doing and teaching contextual ministry. So, so getting that basic foundation, all of us had to go through the ropes, the hoops, and we had to play this game of getting the academic degrees so that we could be taken credibly. So once we got there, it's like once you write your dissertation, you don't have to write more dissertations after that. You can write at a theological and an understanding at a doctoral level that, like I did with my Holy Smoke book, I don't have to write another dissertation so that people in the pew can understand it, because they won't understand it from an academic level. I wrote the Holy Smoke book for the person in the pew. So I can write how I want to write. I can write within a voice of my Native American, the way I speak, the way storytelling. Richard did as well. And our editors really made sure that that happened. But we set the groundwork. We broke, you could say we broke the field and we removed the stones and made it easier for you to plant. But many of you, sometimes I think many of you wouldn't survive what we had to go through in those early years because of the loss of friendships, the being called, pagan worshipers, and being called contextualists and called syncretist. But the more we studied, the more we understood that Europe was syncretist. They were pagan, and they had developed a Christianity that worked for them. But then they told the world we had to work in that box. But what they should have said is that what we did in Europe, you do in your culture now. So when we got the degrees, we can take it that next level and show people you can do it in your own culture. So that was one of the biggest reasons that we had to suffer going through the hoops of bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and writing dissertations, so that you could have a better feel and have a ministry like this in order to ask those questions. Since we did back in the day lost friendships, lost jobs, as well. So could talk more, but that's basics.
Thank you, Uncle Casey. And thank you for that question, Claudette. It's a good question.
All right. I think I'm going to ask my question kind of backwards. Okay, so Jean, the first question is, it sounds like the last thing you said was you don't think you should be a missionary to Native Americans, only to like Scottish people or something. Is that right?
I'm increasingly uncomfortable with the idea of being considered a missionary to Native American people. That just I just continue to be uncomfortable with that and chafe under that. Even though that's how we're promoted amongst our home denominations. I am more comfortable, and I wouldn't even say going back to Scottish people. I mean, that's been fun learning about the land that my ancestors are indigenous to, but I would even say just going to Western evangelical Protestant folk and talking to them, much more comfortable with that notion than vice versa.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Cause and it's because you're too much of an outsider. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I believe so. Because I'm an outsider to the cultural group. Well, that and the history is one where missionary is a laden term. It evokes pictures of people coming in and trying to jettison cultural practice, and there's the boarding school mentality gets attached to that, and it's really hard to see how that mantle and that particular function can be redeemed. I'm not saying it can't. It's just I can't right in the moment see how it can, and so that's what makes me uncomfortable with it.
That's very interesting. Because at first I was thinking, wait, okay, the Apostle Paul, he's Jewish and he's going to the Gentiles, so
Yeah.
he's an outsider. But then Jesus, like with the demoniac of the Gadarenes, the Jew is going to the Gentile. The Gentile demoniac gets saved and wants to come with Jesus, but Jesus is like, no, go back to your Gentiles, preach this to them.
Yeah.
And so he wants the insider to go be an insider. But I'm like, wait, look, Paul's an outsider. But as I'm reading, actually, this book about Paul by N.T. Wright right now, I never realized how much Paul growing up in Tarsus was very Gentile, pagan, and he was just in a Jewish neighborhood of Tarsus or whatever. So he'd grown up having to interface with the Goyim, the Gentiles, all the time. So maybe that's how he got kind of his insider cred, maybe?
Yeah, and the idea that there were diaspora Jews throughout the Gentile world, and so the thought that comes to mind is there needed to be a bridge at one point from the insider group of Jewish disciples to the non-Jewish world, and the fact that there were already diaspora Jewish populations throughout Asia Minor, and the fact that Paul felt called to that work, and I think God used him for that work, I think makes his position a little bit unique. And I don't want to overplay that hand, because I think we can bank a lot on the uniqueness of biblical figures, almost to the point where there's nothing much we can't really identify with them. And I don't want to go too far into that. But I do think Paul was uniquely qualified in certain ways to be that bridge.
Yeah, and one thing there too, Paul was two cultures. Yeah, so he walked in two canoes, as we do, white, and we walk in the native and the white. Paul was walking in the Greek and the Jewish world, and living that and trying to function with the Roman occupation that was happening there. So his Greek side there he was able to cross borders easier that way. I sometimes find that it's better for me sometimes because I can speak into the white world because I'm a quarter white and then 3/4 Potawatomi. So we get into that when I do talk to churches. Okay, I'll open. Other people have questions.
Go ahead, Christina.
Go ahead and lower my hand. I was gonna say I very much appreciate that as well. As I've been pondering, praying, thinking, reading scripture, I feel like I've landed in a very similar place in that I've become, I think, more and more uncomfortable with missionaries that are not from Indigenous communities coming to do missions work, even if they have the best of intentions, that there's something sacred about being within the community. And I was even talking about this with a friend that's Jewish. I kind of wrote that in the chat. Someone that's not a Christian, Jewish person, and saying that even some of the things that Jesus shared and had some really harsh critiques of, like the Pharisees, and called them whitewashed tombstones, and really offered the beauty, but also strong critique, that she was even saying that would have been so inappropriate if he wasn't Jewish, And so we've had very interesting conversations about that. Then another friend who is white, and she's doing a great job leading a church, a multi-ethnic church of folks that want to be in right relationship with the land and Indigenous peoples in her community. And we were having a great conversation as well, that I would say I agree with her and what you were sharing of, like, she was saying, I feel these days that a lot of Western Christians need me to be a missionary to them more than Indigenous people. And she had some experiences as well of being in right relationship with some of the tribes, and even sharing with them, hey, when she was younger, can I stay here? And can I serve with you? And they were just kind of like telling her, we bless you, but we want you to go to your community and, serve them, teach them what you know, teach them what we've taught you. And I think more and more that just feels like a more kind of honorable model, and other folks can have their opinions. And I like what Uncle Casey said as well, because as a multi-ethnic person, I've thought a lot as well about, okay, when I speak or when I offer leadership or critique, or even just like spiritual care to communities, I have to speak out of all of who I am. And so I feel okay, when I'm invited to white churches, to be gracious but offer critique because I'm part white as well. I feel like, okay, in Indigenous circles, in Latino circles that are decolonizing and indigenizing, I think all of us have a unique place given the people that God has given us, to be part of our stories and our ethnicities. And it's a journey in claiming all of who we are, the stories of our ancestors, and figuring out how can we minister out of that place uniquely, and what do we have to offer. And I'm saying all of these words to say it sounds like you've done a lot of thinking about that as well. And yeah, like I said, it sounds like it's coming from a place of integrity and wanting to do things in right relationship. So it was great to hear from you today.
Thank you, Christina. And I just want to throw out there that and this is going to sound really individualistic and Western, but by no means am I saying that the way that I'm thinking is the way that all white Western men should be thinking, or white Western women, or missionaries. This is what I've been wrestling with.
Yes.
Personally. So
yeah. And I also would say I agree with you, but I know that my opinion isn't, the blanket opinion either that everyone should adopt.
Well, let me throw something out there at you, Gene. Coming from a white Western colonized approach, Christianity came through Europe, was developed there, created this whole way of doing things, this liturgical hierarchical Constantinian model, with the pastor laity divide that we know is not in the Bible, but the priesthood of all believers is. What has the white church done right in reaching Native peoples and other peoples across the world? Why did it have to go through a forced hegemonic way to Christianize them? Why couldn't they even begin to think that we as pagan people in Europe created a Christianity that looked like us? Why can't that mentality get to the other churches, even like the churches we have now? And I know we have a guest with us here today, Kim, but the white Western church that we have now, the Methodist church, I'm just only going to pick on them because I'm one of them, is that they're still doing an order of worship that was plucked from the Catholic way and just tweaked a little bit to make a Methodist. And we got the guard, we got the hierarchy, we got bishops, we got everything that world started when every culture around the world could create a Christianity that looks like them. What is this? Oh, I hate to use the word superiority, but what is this mindset of white Westernness that says everybody has to do it the white way?
Yeah, those are great questions. To answer the second question first, my sense is that it's an issue of power. And the Western idea of power for so long has been control. If I can control things, then I can make them predictable. I can even leverage them to get what I want in certain circumstances. And we've seen how the alliance between church and state has led to these situations where it's no longer about knowing creator sets free. It's about leveraging a particular form of power within society. And I think there's also in that maybe probably an idea of, well, I'm gonna get jewels in my crown based on how many people I can bring to Christ, which means compel conversion, right? And I'm going to know that you believe the same thing I believe because you talk about it in the same terms, you use the same terms, use the same phrasing, and that's what gives me peace of mind to know that you believe the same as I believe. And there's all sorts of history laden in that. Talk about the connection between church and state, but I think one of the things that the Protestant Reformation inadvertently did, I think the roots of it were good, and the roots of that answer your first question as far as what has the Western Church done right. Well, there has been a movement over the centuries to, for instance, put the language, the story of Scripture in the language of the so-called common people, right? We don't want to have a special class of priests who are the only ones that can read and interpret Scripture. We think that everybody needs to have that opportunity, right? And that is a good thing. But I think one of the things that the Protestant Reformation inadvertently did was also that combined with Enlightenment thinking, as far as this idea that all the things that are most important are all up here in our heads, and the things that we mentally assent to are the things that are real and important. What happened eventually was that you had different groups breaking off after Luther broke away from the church, and you had other, it was a domino effect. You had group after group after group that were doing the same thing, and you ended up with hundreds of denominations with slight variations on what they say they believe. And because the phrasing and the wording of that set of beliefs does not exactly match up, you have groups saying, well, you don't actually belong to us, or you don't actually belong to Christ. And it's just that fragmentation that's happened. And so I imagine the hierarchy that we saw historically within the Roman Catholic Church gets replicated in each of the fragmented offshoots of the Protestant Church as well. So that cumulatively it becomes all about hierarchy and power and control. That's my take on it. I do believe the putting scripture and even hymns and the activity of the faith in the language of the regular people was a good thing. That was a good impulse and a good movement on the part of the Western Church, for sure.
All right, there's a question, another comment and question from the Facebook chat. So Allison asks, and she says, if you already addressed this and she missed it, she apologizes because she's traveling while she's listening in. But she says, I'm trying to think of a different way to speak about mission. I come from a denomination that speaks of God's mission in the world and Jesus' mission in the world, but it seems mission is fraught due to the doctrine of discovery, manifest destiny, the colonial imposition of values, etc., etc. How can we talk about being part of the kingdom rather than the kingdom of God, and spreading the good news without using mission language? So if you have any, sounds like similar to what you're wrestling with. So maybe you got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a term that can be used. I think I go back to the idea of heart language. And one of the things I firmly believe is that Creator is fluent in everybody's heart language. Every single one of us and every communal group of us. Creator is fluent in that heart language. And when I think of my own experience with Creator, and this is where I go back to the evangelical roots and the whole idea of, well, we want people to have a relationship with God. That's great. That's fine. If that's the truth, then what we're actually saying is, I want you to have an experience with Creator where Creator speaks your heart language. Because I remember when Creator spoke my heart language, and I remember what it did in me and to me and for me, and what it's still doing. And I want you to have that same experience. But in that, my heart language and your heart language are not going to be exactly the same. It may be similar if we come from the same cultural group, but it's not going to be the same, and especially not the same if we're from different cultural groups. And so my desire then is, so for instance, if I just want to put it in concrete terms, my desire for Indigenous North Americans is that each tribe, each group, and each person within that tribe and group has an encounter with Creator where they hear Creator speaking their heart language. And I know for a fact that that is not going to sound the same as when Creator spoke to me. And that's okay, because the ultimate good is that connection with Creator is happening. That's the ultimate good. So again, I don't know if you can boil that down into a term, but that's where I go with it.
Hey, Christina, there's a question for you from Claudette. Because you spoke about being multi-ethnic and using your part of your white heritage to be an insider to critique the church. Claudette is wondering, but yeah, does the white community really accept you if you're mixed? So I don't know if you can speak from your experience on that.
Good question. And the answer is usually not, because I think white folks usually don't accept mixed people. However, I think being all of who I am includes embracing all of who I am, whether the group recognizes it or not, and to feel like this is part of my ancestors as well. And so some of my ancestors were real messed up. And so this means even me part of bringing healing And reconciliation means also speaking into the white church and critiquing. Even sometimes when it's hard, there's times when it's like, Lord, do I really have to go and speak to this community? And it's like, okay, yes. Bless, give me grace, Lord. Let me speak what you want me to speak. But so if that helps, not usually, however, it doesn't change, I think, sometimes our responsibility that like Creator gives us.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just really intaking the information and feeling that yes, we have to speak the love language. And that's it. At the end of the day, we have to speak the love language. And we got to hear it in our hearts. And when we do, we'll talk to each other and we'll understand one another. And I've had, those of you know me know that I'm white. My husband was American Indian. My children are too, of course. But it was hard at times going to church and bringing them, and they were not, they were not white. They were American Indian. And I could feel the sense of the white man having the power, having the authority. They wanted you there, but they really didn't want you there at the same time. They want you there, but they don't want you to say anything. But, God is God. He's on his throne. And I know that he is moving in a way right now. And I believe we're going to see some changes in these years to come. And we're going to see our nation change. We're going to see God moving, and he's going to put the gift, the gifts of the Spirit on God's people. And it's not going to be the way it was. It's going to be different. And I'm excited for that. So I was excited to hear what I heard tonight, because I know more good things are coming. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Lisa.
I don't know if you saw Empedocca's question in the chat there, but it kind of bridges across what we've been talking about most recently, about are indigenous people considered both inside and outside in the context of the white church, because most indigenous folks, most ethnic folks of any kind, you have to have 1 foot in your culture and 1 foot in the status quo culture that's dominating how everything works. Casey talked about, having 1 foot in 2 different canoes. But Empedocca is asking, how does the insider outsider responsibilities impinge on that as far as indigenous people interacting with the white church?
From my experience, and it's not all encompassing, but from my experience, there is, to a certain extent, a little bit more openness when someone who is culturally outside, I should say ethnically outside, but religiously, culturally inside, actually has a bit of leverage to speak out and voice critique within certain parameters. After a certain amount of time, they just get written off and silenced, and that idea that like Christina said in the chat, they want the color in the room, but not the folks to speak up. But my experience has been ministers and missionaries, non-white ministers and missionaries actually can come in and say, this is what I've observed and it doesn't make sense to me. And they can do it very soon after entering the community and be heard. Now, whether that leads to anything, any substantial change is another question altogether, because of the paternalism that lives within the white church. It's more of a, it's almost, and this is going to sound really crass, but again, this has been my experience. It almost becomes the same as having kids bring the message in a church service, right? There's a certain amount of appreciation, but there's also a treatment of them as children, and that's where the paternalism, and it's sad because if the white church would get over itself and actually listen, things might be able to change. But yeah, sorry if that sounds overly critical, but I'm automatically going in my mind to situations where I sat in worship services and heard things, and then was part of the congregation after the observation was leveled, and after the person left and nothing really changes or other conversations happen, then it just kind of gets swept under the rugs. So
Is that a real hand, Christina?
Yes. If you don't mind just adding, like having been in ministry for like a decade in a community that I would say was pretty white and evangelical. There's a certain extent, I think, when you start to speak up or you start to, rise up in leadership, there'll be a lot of spiritual, emotional harm sometimes that's done. And I think discerning how long to stay and when to leave is also really healthy if you find yourself in that situation. I've also found that I think for myself personally, I had to leave that organization, for my own sake, because we don't also want to give our best to organizations or communities that aren't going to change or aren't going to take to heart the teaching that we graciously offer. So there's a discernment piece to know some communities are really ripe and ready to listen, and those communities stay and teach. But if folks are even hearing and not changing, I think those are kind of the times to discern. Maybe it's time for me to leave and go elsewhere to where Creator would have me. I guess the word that even I received when I left was don't need to give your best to a community with holes in it that's not ready to receive this teaching or these words. What's been helpful for me is just being like a guest speaker or a guest preacher at churches, because it allows me to go in to learn, to be gracious, but then also, let the community, bless the community and let them receive it or not receive it. And then, so just out of experience, I was just kind of sharing a few personal thoughts.
Yeah, good word.
Yeah, I think that is really important because, even though, ethnically, I don't have any indigenous Turtle Island DNA that I'm aware of. And I was raised in a status quo home, but at a pretty young age, I started really kicking against that. So even though in a lot of ways I look status quo, I'm not at all. And so I can definitely speak that, like when Casey asked, like, oh, what is the church that came through Europe and is now in America gotten right? Like my first inclination is like not a whole lot. That's and so but I think there's a danger there that you can become overly critical too. And so I think that's like where the discernment that Christine is talking about is important, that like understand how far you can push a particular group or organization that you're in, you know, because if you push too hard, then it's just going to be the new wine bursting the old wineskins, you know. So you need to know, you know, how much to push in the particular organization you're in, and then that's also recognizing when I've said everything useful that I can say here, and now's my time to step back. And you know, and I think for non-Indigenous people working with Indigenous cultures, you know, there's a similar type of thing. There's a point where I have something of value to offer, but then there's also knowing that time when it's more appropriate for me to step back and maybe just be in a very background supportive role, or maybe just completely hands off. And so, yeah, I think that really gets to, because all of these interactions are relationships, and relationships all have their own individual dynamic. And that's not easy. People hate that because you don't have your quick pat answer and your little boxes to put everything in. It's just like all messy all over the place, but that's really, you know, our realities. Yeah, I think that's really important.
And to your point, Brian, when I worked at the Bible college, I made this comment to a colleague. I said, like, I felt like I was constantly navigating the borders of my expertise and my ignorance. And the thing about that is, when it comes to ignorance, there's a philosopher that said, of what we do not know, we cannot speak. So the proper response to being faced with a place where I don't know is to say, I don't know, and just step back and listen and observe. Yeah. So, but also, you know, as far as being overly critical, like, yeah, and this is a battle I have to fight within myself as well, is to avoid becoming cynical when it comes to the family of origin, so to speak. Yeah.
I'll share a little bit to that. You know, I've been at this now 30 years and spoke to a lot of different churches, and getting my education and becoming a little more you know, knowledgeable about contextualization, church planting, denominational structures and all that. And then I find myself, when I go to visit a church and talk, it is such at a very tiptoe level that I go, I'm afraid to break eggshells when I'm walking in that church, because I have so much knowledge in an area of contextualization, but who I'm speaking to has the very base level of what a native ministry in most white churches has to look like the church that I'm in, right there. And it has to look white Western in order to be even a native church. They can't imagine that a native church could even look different than anything else that they have. And that's what happened on the reservation here. At one time, there were 17 Navajo United Methodist connected churches. And today there's 2 after all these years, because they don't fit that world. But they, you know, use the term at that time, all of those churches, it was a feather in the denominational cap. You know, it was a feather in their cap to show that, hey, look at us, we got 17 native churches, and now they're not talking about how well they failed. And here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, there has never in all of United Methodist history in New Mexico ever been a ministry to or a congregation for Native Americans in the city limits, ever. So what's going on there? You know, I shared that in a church council meeting of the churches in Albuquerque. And I said, how many of you have a ministry to Native people? You know, one raised their hands. I says, well, what do you do? well, we feed the homeless. I says, well, that's not really directed just to Native people. So I find myself at a very entry level when I go to talk to churches about what we're doing with Good Medicine Way. They just have to view it, because what we're doing here, talking about these issues, it's really touchy in some areas. In the Assembly of God areas, there's very few that would even listen to what we're talking about here. The Nazarene Church, they have no idea at all that of doing anything contextual. A white Western approach to Navajo missions is what they'll do and what they'll always do. And the only thing Native in those churches are the people in the pew. That's it. Everything is white Western. So there's got to be a way to move forward with finding a missionary. I think your missionary calling. I know several missionaries in over 30 years. Several of them have not raised up one pastor to take their position. You should, if you want to do a Pauline way of doing ministry, is that you raise up somebody, you start it, you nurture them, and then you move on, and that congregation, moves on by itself, develops. So I don't know. I have some things to say, but I want to leave more time for you. But what do you think, Jane?
Yeah, I've not seen anything to contradict your experience, Uncle Casey. It seems the same. I have a theory that I'm working on, and it's not ready for public consumption yet, but I have a theory that specifically the way that the church looks in different regions, it can be pretty directly tied back to the seeds that were planted, how the faith was first presented among the indigenous peoples of that region. So yeah.
Yeah, the second part of what I want to share with that is the churches that were planted among Native American people over, so let's say 100 years ago, they were designed to be assimilation boxes. They were designed to take the nativeness out of us so that we would become white Western. That was the whole mentality. That was why we went to boarding schools. That's why they took our children. That's why they forced us on the reservation and told us that you have to go to churches. That was one thing that, if you want to be more like white Western, you have to go to our churches. You have to send your kids to school. You have to farm. Even Dawes, he said, you even have to drink whiskey, so it's even all these years, the churches that we have are still not allowing Native people to be Native. I can go through Oklahoma, I can go back in Michigan, and I can go to those churches. There's still a white Western approach, and they don't incorporate anything Native into their anything is an expression of Native worship at all. It has to be a white Western way. Some of the new things that I'm helping people develop are creating these avenues of creating a Christianity that looks like them. So.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
All right, in Petadaka, you get the final question.
All right, it's just more to go on kind of what I was really wanting to ask. And so like in this setting that we have here, we're not so much pushing like white people to like open up and try to understand from our perspective what everything is. But my real question was like, is there certain responsibilities that us as Indigenous, Indian, Native people, do we have that same kind of responsibility that we place on the white people that we come in contact with? Yeah, I guess that's kind of how I wanted to say it. Do we have that same kind of responsibility as we place on the white people that we have to do as well? Like when we go into like the white churches, like is there something that we can learn, something that we can like grow on? Is there something that we can like have ourselves open for? You know what I mean? Yeah. Sorry, it's kind of a weird question, I know, but
No, but,
do you
but
think
the,
that? Yeah.
yeah, the thought that came to mind was what Eshe shared at the very beginning, was about being yourself. Like if I can be really blunt for a minute, I don't want nor need people of other cultures to be white. I need them to be themselves, because the way I've come to think about it, if we look at Revelation, we look at the worship that's happening around the throne, and we look at the fact that very specifically we're told that people of all tribes and all nations and all tongues are going to be represented, then the way we get a foretaste of that worship is for people from every ethnic group to be specifically and uniquely themselves, and to express themselves in their cultural uniqueness. And I believe actually that's at least part of the road to healing, is to allow that to happen. Because we're given that image already in scripture of the worship that takes place around the throne in heaven. So to pursue that path is I think part of the answer. There's a book that just came out that I'm really interested in reading called In the Church as in Heaven, that deals with this idea of, are we seeing a reflection of heavenly worship in the earthly church, right? And there's another book that I read called The Fellowship of Difference, where that author said pretty specifically, if we're not seeing a reflection, we are missing something. We have, just the responsibility we have to each other is to contribute our unique selves to the group. So I don't know if that did answer your question. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
One observation, I'll hopefully can end with this. It says in Revelation that all the peoples and the cultures and the languages were around the throne, all voicing their praise. And it's like that kind of theme is the church gonna look like that. Sometimes I think I had this image. Okay, here's the throne in the center, and all around are the people speaking their languages. And I almost think, and I feel that it's cut up like a pie. So the Baptists are in this slice of pie. They're speaking their language, they're worshiping in their way. Over here are the native people, and over here are the African people, and here, but they're all doing it in their own, but they're still segmented. I don't know if anybody ever thought of seeing that, or do you see it as everybody's conglomerated around the throne? A white person's next to a black, an Indian's next to an Asian, or are we tied? Are we separated in our way and all? Because I don't know. Somebody said one time, you'll be surprised to know who's in heaven when you get there. Yeah. Maybe you have a comment to that. I don't know.
I love it. I was going to see if I could try and real quickly pull up a picture that I once found called Throne Throng, and I'm going to see if I can find it real quick and share it. Hold on. I can remember what presentation I put it in.
All right, well, while Gene is looking for that, one approach that I take when dealing with, different churches and different groups and you're trying to push and discern is really the same approach that Jesus took when he told the parable of the prodigal son. Because if you remember, Jesus told that parable to the religious leaders. So the point of the prodigal son is not what happens to the prodigal son. The point of the prodigal son is what happens with the older brother. And so the religious leaders weren't down with how Jesus was bringing the good news. They didn't like the fact that these people who had been written off were now coming into the family of God. That made them really uncomfortable. And they were trying to tell Jesus to knock it off. And then Jesus tells them this story about this person in the family who was lost and came back. And in the parable, you know, the father does go to some lengths to work with the older brother. You know, the older brother refuses to come in. The father could have just blown him off at that point and said, well, fine, stay outside then. You know, but he goes out to the older brother in the field, and he doesn't like get on his case. He doesn't condemn him. You know, he doesn't berate him. He tries to open him up to his perspective of love and tells the older brother, can't you walk in love with your younger brother the way that I'm walking in love and the way I'm walking in love with you right now? And he leaves that invitation open. But then Jesus doesn't take the parable any further from there. He leaves it in the religious leaders' court. And I think that's what we often have to do, is like, we can present the case, we can say why it's scriptural, we can say why this is a loving movement of God, we can point to all those things, but in the end, it has to be their decision about whether they're going to come in or not. And if they decide not to come in, then that's on them. And I'm just going to say, fine, I'm going to keep moving with God. If you don't want to be a part of that, that's I'm not going to lose sleep over anymore. I've given you the invitation to invite you in, and I've explained why it's important. So, yeah, so I really use that model that Jesus uses in how he told the parable of the prodigal son and the context that all takes place.
That's the picture that you're showing, Gene, there?
Yeah, I put it in the chat. It's called Throne Throng by a guy named Hyatt Moore.
Well, thank you so much, Jean, for sharing with us tonight. We appreciate you coming and all of who you are and bringing that to us. And that was great. Any kind of closing thoughts that you'd like to share before we go into our closing song?
Thank you for allowing me to share. And I appreciate the Good Medicine Way family so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I also realized we're kind of like twins today. So that's pretty cool. Right. Yes, thank you so much. And thank you.
Yeah, I noticed that too, because you're right next to each other in the group.
Yeah, we're like buddies right here. Like we're what is it? From Willy Wonka, the two little
Oompa Loompas? Is that?
Oompa Loompas.
That's great.
Yeah. But thank you so much again. And yeah, we have our closing song from Leah and Brian. Uh-oh, I think we can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. All right, so that was Jean's picture, and I'm looking forward to that day. I don't want to say, because I don't think we're all going to be segregated off into our different groups, but I also feel like every culture will be fully honored, so we'll be able to really fully experience each other's cultures. And through that get a more awesome picture of the God that we're before the throne of. So yeah, and then we're going to do the lift you up round dance here real quick, and hopefully you all have the space to round dance there where you're at and sing along.
Thank you so much, Grovers. Bless you both for always providing us with songs. And then we have Umperadaka is going to bless us. Give us a closing blessing tonight.
Sorry, I had to step outside because it was a little bit noisy in there. My babies are watching Zootopia right now, and my husband was cooking some dinner. So, but yeah, anyway. Also, Becky, that was really great singing. We heard you singing along to the Lift You Up Round Dance. It was awesome. Special guest, eh? But yeah, and thank you, Jean, and thank you, everybody. Christina, you've done a great job as the MC tonight. I really enjoyed the way that you just kind of let everything flow. So that was really beautiful. And yeah, so I look forward to watching the playback. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and give our send-off blessing for us to make it through the next week. All right. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for joining each one of us here tonight. Thank you for allowing us to be able to hear what you have to share through Gene. It's really nice to be able to hear what he has to say. Usually we just have him for the smoke signals, and I'm just really glad that we were able to learn a little bit more about him and his experiences, and to just hear from a different perspective. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for these beautiful summer days, Lord. I know that a lot of us are getting darker because of the sun. I know that a lot of us are probably getting our bodies moving while we're going outside, and like just every beautiful thing that you make during the summertime, Lord. I want to thank you for that. I ask that you help us to slow down and recognize the beautiful things that you've created, all the things around us. I pray that you help us to have soft hearts when it comes to a lot of the hard things that come against us in this life. I pray that you allow us to be comfortable in the way that you've created us, and just allow us to really be ourselves, Lord. I know that you've made each one of us to be a part of this huge family, and I want to thank you for that, Lord. I pray that you watch over all of our relations as they travel during this hot summer, wherever they may be going, Lord. I pray that you put your hand on each one of the cars that surround them as well, and get them safely to wherever they're going. I realize that we ask you for many things in prayer, but I also want to take a moment and express gratitude for all of the beautiful and wonderful things that you're doing in each one of our lives. And Heavenly Father, I just pray that you give us the conviction, give us the confidence, and just allow us to feel that love, Lord, that you've made for us, that you try to show us every single day. I ask all these things in your Son Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Thanks, Gene. Good job tonight, as always. Yeah, great. Thank you, Christina, for emceeing. Pray for me. Next 2 weeks, I'll be on the road to Michigan. My tribes, the Potawatomi tribes, 9 of them are gathering in one location, and asked me to do my cradleboard presentation there. So they're taking good care of me. So those are always good to have. All right, y'all.
Hello? Hey,
Love you all.
it says Kenny for next week. Is that Kenny Wallace? It says Kenny for next week. Is that Kenny Wallace?
Yes, Kenny Wallace. I'll double check with him that he's on. He always wants a little reminder. Everybody wants a reminder that they're going to be on. Yes, and then September, I got a hold of Mark Charles, or he got a hold of me. He'll be in the area and he'll be doing his Abraham Lincoln talk with us that time. So it'll be, maybe we can make, everybody can fly out and you can all be together here. Otherwise, we'll see you on Zoom. So we should be able to have a good crowd. Last time he was here, we had about 30, I believe. So it was good time.
When did you say that is, Uncle Casey?
Oh, it's going, he hasn't picked a date yet, but he's going to be out here in September. Yeah, so I got a couple others. Also on the 7th, if you are in the area, we're having a reporter come out who's doing a documentary, and they're interested on how this Potawatomi guy is working to do Good Medicine Way. And you'll be interviewing a little bit of all of us to see how we do it. So we're going to be part of a public broadcasting channel doing a documentary. That's cool. Yes. Okay, everyone have a good evening. Okay, thank you, Brian and Leah, holding down the fort.
Blessings.
That's